Where's my map? There's no map. It's just green.
No, there's a map there. Look at the monitor.
Right?
Oh, God. Ron, where's my legs?
This is Anchorman 2. It's a sequel that basically takes the dials of its predecessor and turns it up all the way to 11. But some things just aren't meant to go to 11.
Why did you take it from us?
You're clearly standing in front of us, Brick.
Anchorman 2 was released in 2013, nearly a decade after the first film hit theaters. Anchorman: The Legend of Ron Burgundy became a cultural phenomenon that cemented Will Ferrell as one of the biggest names in comedy at the time.
That escalated quickly.
While Anchorman 2: The Legend Continues fared far better than its predecessor at the box office and received a fairer reception from critics, the film failed to generate success with audiences. Anchorman's style of comedy stems from director Adam McKay's decision to allow his actors to improvise a majority of their dialogue throughout the film. Improvisation is often something that directors try to avoid for a multitude of reasons. The first being that, from a production standpoint, it's a disaster. The filmmaking process is meticulous, and every detail of every script is planned and accounted for. With a focus on brevity, there's no real room for adding unnecessary dialogue that could A. Jeopardize the vision of the directors, writers, and producers, B. Create insane continuity issues with how the characters interact with one another, and C. Confuse the editors in post-production as to which takes and reactions to actually use throughout the film. Adam McKay began his career by mastering the craft of improvisational comedy. McKay was a performer on one of Chicago's most popular improv groups, and he was also a main stage performer at the Second City. McKay's ability to harness improv to his advantage could be likened to capturing lightning in a bottle, and it really shines the most in Anchorman: The Legend of Ron Burgundy. Some of the deleted outtakes from the improv presented throughout the film are some of the funniest moments, but they were cut for various reasons, primarily being that they didn't add much to the actual story.
And people are hoping to maybe catch a glimpse of the rarest,
That stench
phenomenal.
smells like the inside of a fake leg.
That's where Anchorman 2 gets things incredibly wrong. Anchorman 2 makes the mistake of thinking that the only reason Anchorman was as successful as it was due to how funny it was. But funny only works if it has reality to prop it up. Jokes told within a story can only be as strong as the story is on its own.
I'm telling you, she is a real ball buster.
A real ice queen.
I just burned my tongue.
But the story has to stand out on its own first. This is something that the original Anchorman does very well. When stripped of the comedy entirely, the first Anchorman film could potentially make for a fairly high-stakes workplace drama. There's a power struggle, inter-office romance, people lose their careers. The spine of Anchorman is drama, and then uses that drama to support the absolute ridiculousness of the characters presented within it. The result is that we become emotionally attached to the characters enough to jump on board with them during the moments in which the director chooses to allow them to improvise.
What is that? It smells like a turd covered in burnt hair.
The filmmakers do the work in setting up the humor through the grounded narrative structure. There's a saying for this. It's called earning it. Anchorman 1 earns its laughs, and it earns them through grounding the comedy in reality. Think of comedy as a bunch of helium balloons. If you don't have anything weighing them down to earth, they're gonna fly further and further away from you until you can no longer see them and they eventually destroy themselves. However, with the proper amount of oppositional force, you have something delightful and fun to look at and enjoy. Anchorman 2 makes the mistake of thinking that they had already earned the right to go crazy with jokes from the first film, and it should be enough to drive the comedy. This couldn't be more incorrect. The concept of earning your humor isn't a one-and-done thing. You don't just earn it and then receive some sort of free pass to create and do anything you want to the end of time. You have to keep earning the comedy. There's never a moment where that stops. Anchorman 2 feels less like an actual film and more like an extremely fast-paced joke showcase, in which the job of the performers is to try to make each other laugh instead of telling an actual story.
I took that long to think of that.
It's not that there's no story present within Anchorman 2, there is a very basic premise that serves as a slightly heightened version of the story presented in the original film, but it doesn't feel like a strong enough story spine to support the level of improvisation presented throughout the film. Ron Burgundy and Veronica Corningstone break up, as Corningstone is promoted to lead anchor, leaving Ron Burgundy jobless and desperate. Ron is then courted by the first 24-hour news network to anchor a late-night time slot, and then the story starts to come apart at the seams shortly after that. Ron engages in a rivalry between the primetime anchor, Jack Lime, ignores his family, alienates his entire crew, and ends up losing his eyesight. He returns home to rehabilitate rehabilitate a shark and then returns to attend his son's piano recital. The entire film feels like it was written through stream of consciousness, which makes sense when you consider the fact that improv is essentially a focused approach to maximizing the comedic value of stream of consciousness. There was so much improvisation added into the script that the original cut clocked in at over 4 hours.
You can't gestrin on the spermin.
King Gestrin on Spermin?
4 hours is fine if you're watching Lord of the Rings, but sitting through 4 hours of slapstick comedy can almost be madness-inducing. Adam McKay said that there are roughly 240 alternate jokes and dialogue sequences sitting on the cutting room floor, some of which were just too strange for audiences, and has even floated the idea of releasing alternate versions of the film with new jokes swapped in.
Holy rainbow suspenders. Bob Cratchit's 6-string banjo. Gandhi in a Speedo. Moses on a Vespa.
When you take this into consideration, it really starts to seem like the intent of making Anchorman 2 was to have the story serve as a vehicle to generate improvised comedic moments, instead of generating improvised comedic moments to support an actual story. Improvisation is a risky spice to use in your film, but when used correctly, it can lead to some truly amazing moments. The scene in Indiana Jones where Indy shoots the swordsman was improvised. The scene in Jurassic Park where Ian Malcolm distracts the T-Rex was improvised by Jeff Goldblum in rehearsals. Even the improvised moments in the first Anchorman are some of the most quotable and hilarious scenes in the history of cinematic comedy.
I read somewhere that their periods attract bears. The bears can smell the menstruation.
This serves to illustrate the fact that an actor's intuition can be one of the most powerful and effective tools in the filmmaking process. However, too much improvisation can be a detriment. Making a sequel to a film shouldn't feel like you're making a sequel to every single joke presented in the original movie. This is a trap that a lot of comedy sequels fall into. Rather than challenge their characters in new and interesting ways, writers often make the decision to harken back to the original film by delivering heightened versions of the previous entry's jokes. This requires balance that Adam McKay just doesn't apply to Anchorman 2. In Anchorman 2, McKay delivers just more of the same, but bigger. And bigger doesn't always mean better. They heighten a fight scene to the point where the ghost of Stonewall Jackson consumes the souls of his enemies, Harrison Ford turns into a werewolf, and Brick destroys buildings with a gun from the future. The sequence is a callback to the first film, in which a variety of celebrity cameos appear as the lead anchors of various news networks and engage Ron Burgundy and company in hand-to-hand combat. The original sequence is already extremely over the top, so an attempt to heighten it would be a pretty daunting task.
Brick killed a guy. Did you throw a trident?
Yeah, there were horses and a man on fire, and I killed a guy with a trident.
To say that McKay doesn't pull any punches here is a bit of an understatement. And is this scene funny? Yes. It's very hard not to laugh at how absurd this sequence is. However, it is nearly 10 minutes long and essentially adds nothing but humor to the overall narrative. Anchorman 2 has its fair share of funny moments, but it doesn't feel like a feature-length film. Improvisation is a fun element to add into your film, and when used properly, it can create some genuinely surprising and delightful moments for both the performers and audience alike.
I'm a man who discovered the wheel and built the Eiffel Tower out of metal and brawn.
However, if you don't monitor the level of improv happening throughout your project, it can get out of hand quickly. In comedy, the jokes and humor are king, but if you don't support them with a proper story, then you aren't really watching a movie anymore, you're watching an improv show. And while it can be fun at times, 2 hours of jokes without structure starts to feel extremely exhausting and puts the audience into a glass case of emotion. And that's it for this one, folks. Feel free to let us know what you think in the comment section below. You might see a couple of links floating in the player window here. Feel free to click on any of those if you'd like to stick around. And hey, thanks for watching Nerdstalgic.